For generations, one prominent scholar once lamented, the figure of King David remained stubbornly elusive in the archaeological record, a central pillar of scripture with no discernible foundation in the dust and stones of the ancient world. This statement captured a profound academic paradox, a king whose legacy shaped millennia, yet whose very existence outside of the biblical text seemed an archaeological phantom. For centuries, this unsettling silence plagued historians and theologians alike, leaving a gaping void in our understanding. How could such a pivotal figure, the progenitor of a prophesied eternal dynasty, leave absolutely no trace? It brings us to the core mystery of our investigation. Did a historical King David truly exist, or was he, as some scholarship suggests, a foundational myth woven from later traditions? This profound academic paradox found its first tangible challenge with the discovery of the Tel Dan Stele, an ancient stone inscription that dramatically shifted the entire debate. But what does this remarkable artifact actually reveal about King David, and how does its message contrast with the deeply ingrained narratives passed down through generations? For countless generations, the narrative of King David has been etched into the bedrock of Western civilization. He's the shepherd boy who defied a giant, the skilled musician who soothed a king, the charismatic leader who united disparate tribes into a formidable kingdom, with Jerusalem as its capital. This David, revered as the founder of an eternal dynasty, forms the very cornerstone of biblical theology and messianic expectation. From Sunday school lessons to profound scholarly treatises, this powerful account has shaped religious and cultural understanding for millennia, presenting a vivid, detailed portrait of an ancient monarch whose legacy continues to resonate. This is the orthodox position, the deeply ingrained story against which all archaeological inquiry into his existence must inevitably be measured. But to truly grasp the monumental impact of any new discovery, we must first immerse ourselves in the historical landscape that predated such revelations. The Iron Age Levant, specifically the tumultuous 9th and 8th centuries BCE, was this historical landscape. This was a fragmented world, a geopolitical chessboard where smaller entities like the nascent kingdoms of Judah and Israel vied for influence amidst the looming shadow of powerful Aramean city-states, most notably Damascus. For decades, scholarship struggled with a glaring absence, a striking lack of contemporaneous external evidence for the early Israelite monarchies, including any mention of a King David or his dynasty. This Davidic silence, as some termed it, fueled profound skepticism among biblical minimalists, who argued that such figures were purely literary creations, perhaps mythical founders invented centuries later. This prevailing academic challenge created a profound void, making any authentic discovery that could bridge this historical gap not just significant, but utterly revolutionary. It was into this landscape of doubt that something entirely unexpected would emerge. Then, in the scorching summer of 1993, the academic world was profoundly disrupted. At Tel Dan in northern Israel, archaeologist Avraham Biran and his team unearthed fragments of a monumental basalt stele. Over the next year, additional pieces of this ancient stone, covered in an unfamiliar Aramaic script, came to light. Initial excitement quickly gave way to a palpable tension as scholars began the painstaking process of cleaning and deciphering the inscriptions. This was clearly a victory monument, boasting of royal triumphs, but as the intricate carvings yielded their secrets, a specific phrase began to materialize, a linguistic bombshell that would send shockwaves through biblical archaeology. The question became urgent. What precisely did these ancient characters reveal about the elusive past? The painstaking work of decipherment quickly yielded its first astonishing revelation. Etched into one of the basalt fragments, a sequence of Aramaic letters spelled out bytdwd, Beit David. On screen, you can see it rendered as bytdwd. This wasn't merely a personal name. The prefix Beit, meaning house of, clearly indicated a dynastic lineage, a royal house. This specific formulation, House of David, immediately resonated with biblical texts, but here it was, outside the Bible, on an enemy king's victory stele, dating to the mid-9th century BCE. The initial publications by archaeologists Avraham Biran and epigrapher Joseph Neve in the Israel Exploration Journal and Biblical Archaeology Review presented this finding to a stunned academic world. It was a textual earthquake, the very first extra-biblical reference to a Davidic dynasty, shattering decades of scholarly skepticism. But what did this seemingly small phrase truly signify for the historicity of King David, and how would it redefine our understanding of his legendary status? The consensus among mainstream biblical archaeologists and epigraphers was swift and largely unified. Scholars like William G. Dever, a leading figure in Syro-Palestinian archaeology, and epigrapher André Lemaire affirmed that bytdwd unequivocally referred to the ruling dynasty of Judah, a royal house claiming descent from a founder named David. This wasn't a casual mention, it was a formal reference by a rival kingdom acknowledging a powerful entity. Crucially, this inscription didn't suddenly prove every detail of the biblical narrative about David. Instead, it offered something far more profound, the first concrete, extra-biblical, near-contemporary evidence for a Davidic royal house existing in the 9th century BCE. It provided an anchor, a historical footing that had been conspicuously absent. For decades, the debate had been whether a Davidic dynasty existed at all. Now, with this single inscription, the very ground beneath biblical scholarship began to shift, forcing a fundamental reevaluation of King David's place in history and the narratives built around him. The discovery of bytdwd wasn't just another archaeological find, it was a direct challenge to the very foundation of biblical minimalist thought. For decades, many scholars had argued that King David was a legendary construct, a figure entirely lacking extra-biblical corroboration. If David was merely a myth, then the later narratives built around him were pure fiction. However, the Tel Dan Stele provided a crucial Davidic anchor paradox, a tangible point of historical corroboration that compelled this reevaluation. This single inscription shifted the entire scholarly debate. It was no longer a question of if a Davidic dynasty existed in the 9th century BCE, but rather what kind of historical figure was David, and how much of the biblical account could genuinely be reconciled with archaeological reality. Yet a single inscription, while groundbreaking, is rarely the full story. Could there be other, less clear, or even debated references that support this claim, further thickening the plot? However, relying on a solitary inscription, no matter how monumental, inherently limits our understanding. True historical inquiry necessitates broader corroboration. This raises a crucial question. Might another ancient text, perhaps one even more fragmented and fiercely debated, offer a corroborating echo of this enigmatic Davidic dynasty? Indeed, the Tel Dan Stele might not stand alone. The Mesha stele, also known as the Moabite stone, offers a tantalizing, albeit more controversial, parallel. Dating to the mid-9th century BCE, much like Tel Dan, this stele records the victories of King Mesha of Moab over Israel. What's shocking, however, is a severely damaged line that some prominent scholars, most notably André Lemaire, have painstakingly reconstructed to also read House of David. While this interpretation remains contested among epigraphers due to the fragment's poor condition, its very possibility creates a compelling pattern of external, near-contemporary references to a Davidic dynasty. If accurate, these two inscriptions, separated by geography but united by era and adversary, would provide significant cumulative evidence. They paint a picture of a recognized Davidic entity, powerful enough to be boasted about by rival kings. But why would these foreign kings commemorate a Davidic dynasty on their own victory monuments? This commemoration by a rival king of a Davidic dynasty lies in the very nature of ancient Near Eastern victory monuments. These steles were not historical chronicles, but potent propaganda designed to glorify the conquering king. When an Aramean ruler, widely identified as Hazael of Damascus, commissioned the Tel Dan Stele, his motive was clear: to broadcast his military might. Boasting of defeating the King of Israel and the House of David was a strategic assertion of dominance, confirming these were significant political entities. It reveals the geopolitical realities of the 9th century BCE, where a Davidic dynasty was a recognized power player, formidable enough to be a prized conquest. This inscription, therefore, provides invaluable insight into the perceived importance of the House of David by its contemporaries and adversaries. However, despite this potent external validation, a critical distinction must be made. Does acknowledging a dynasty definitively confirm the specific historical figure of King David himself? This question remains the crux of the scholarly counterargument. Indeed, the Tel Dan style, while undeniably groundbreaking, does not, according to much scholarship, offer direct archaeological evidence for King David himself. While the inscription validates the existence of a powerful dynastic lineage, the House of David, it speaks to the ongoing political reality of the 9th century BCE, not necessarily the specific legendary figure of the biblical King David. As prominent historian William G. Deaver has noted, the stele forces us to accept a historical dynasty, but it doesn't confirm the shepherd king who slew Goliath. Many biblical minimalists, having adjusted their initial skepticism about any Davidic presence, still maintain a cautious stance. They argue that a dynastic name doesn't automatically authenticate every detail within the much later biblical narratives. This nuanced perspective highlights that historical kernels, once established, can evolve into far grander, politically charged narratives over centuries. Indeed, the Tel Dan Stele reveals a deeper, more political dimension to the making of the biblical canon, as the historical existence of a House of David in the 9th century BCE provided a potent, undeniable kernel of truth. This wasn't just a fleeting mention, it was a recognized dynasty, an archaeological anchor that later biblical authors and editors could amplify and elaborate upon. Here, we see the blueprint for what scholarship suggests might be called the anti-hero narrative, a historical figure or dynasty, perhaps less glorious or even ruthless in reality, becomes the foundational material for a powerful theological and political myth. The compilation of these biblical texts, centuries after the stele was carved, was thus a deliberate process steeped in human agency and specific ideological aims. It transformed a regional power player into the eternal king, constructing a foundational narrative for national identity and messianic expectation. This intricate interplay between archaeological fact and deliberate narrative ambition compels us to synthesize these findings further. The Tel Dan Stele, therefore, stands as a critical Davidic anchor paradox, a singular archaeological discovery that fundamentally reorients the entire scholarly landscape. It compels us to move beyond the binary of extreme skepticism versus uncritical acceptance. As we've seen, this ancient stone inscription, alongside the debated but suggestive Mesha stele, unequivocally establishes the historical existence of a House of David in the 9th century BCE. This wasn't merely a biblical invention, it was a recognized political entity, acknowledged by its rivals. This tangible historical footing doesn't prove the entire biblical narrative, but it undeniably provides a crucial external validation for a key biblical claim. It necessitates a more complex, nuanced understanding, where historical kernels are seen as the fertile ground for later narrative development. To truly grasp the implications, we must pose a profound hypothetical. What if the historical David, the progenitor of the dynasty acknowledged by the Tel Dan Stele, was a far more earthly, perhaps even ruthless, political leader of a modest Iron Age chiefdom? What if his actual reign involved pragmatic alliances, brutal conquests, and moral ambiguities far removed from the idealized shepherd king? This thought experiment forces us to confront the intricate process by which historical kernels are transformed into powerful, enduring narratives. It provokes us to ponder the chasm between archaeological data and meticulously crafted religious traditions. So, what specific conclusions can we draw from this synthesis of evidence regarding King David? In synthesizing the evidence, the Tel Dan Stele stands as compelling archaeological testimony. It unequivocally demonstrates the existence of a House of David, a ruling dynasty in the 9th century BCE. This discovery significantly strengthens the scholarship supporting a historical King David, not necessarily as the exact legendary figure of the Bible, but as the foundational progenitor of a recognized, powerful lineage. It forces a more nuanced approach, acknowledging that while archaeological finds can ground biblical narratives in historical reality, the texts themselves often elaborate on these kernels with theological and political intent. History and text, though interwoven, demand distinct and critical analysis. Yet, even with this monumental finding, the man himself, the iconic shepherd king, remains a figure whose true historical contours are still elusive. The Tel Dan Stele undeniably anchors a House of David in the historical record, a monumental shift for biblical archaeology. Yet, ironically, this very discovery only deepens the mystery surrounding King David himself. The inscription speaks of his powerful dynasty, a recognized force in the ancient world, but the man, the shepherd, the poet, the warrior king of legend, remains largely an enigma hidden in the shadows of textual elaboration and archaeological silence. The quest for his true historical contours continues, an ever-evolving journey shaped by new discoveries and critical analysis. What are your insights into the Tel Dan Stele's profound implications for biblical history? We've explored the profound impact of the Tel Dan Stele on our understanding of King David. Now, we turn to you. How does the existence of a House of David outside the biblical narrative reshape your perspective on ancient history and the formation of sacred texts? Join the conversation in the comments below. Share your insights, engage with fellow scholars and enthusiasts, and help us collectively unravel these enduring mysteries. If the complex interplay between archaeology, history, and textual criticism fascinates you, and you're eager to challenge long-held assumptions, then there's much more to explore within the veiled corners of history. This journey into ancient texts and their hidden meanings is just beginning. To continue unraveling the enduring mysteries that reshape our understanding of foundational narratives, ensure you join the Biblical Mysteries community. We consistently delve into evidence often overlooked, challenging conventional wisdom with rigorous academic inquiry. Up next, we venture further into the shadows of early Christianity. Prepare for an unsettling exploration of the lost Gospels of Nag Hammadi and the alternative realities they propose about the origins of faith. Your intellectual journey continues. After seeing how the Tel Dan Stele confirms a House of David, but paradoxically deepens the mystery of the man himself, how does this challenge your view of biblical authority? Answer in the comments. I read and reply to every single one. This pattern of reinterpretation isn't unique. Next, we uncover why the Old Testament God often seems like two different beings. Subscribe and turn on notifications to never miss truths. Like this if you understood what others missed, and share it.